Yeah. You're not going? Keep you in the loop. Okay, I'm sure you've got enough connections. You don't have to worry about that. Yeah, you do. That'll be fun. Well, all right. Well, I'm glad you're here in this
This isn't going. It's like I'm trying to get it shared. It's not me. There's a prize. I was there.
Welcome, everyone. We'll invite the candidates to make their way up and everyone to find their seat. We're going to get started.
Same as always. I'm scared of life. Like everybody else. Thank you. Thank you. Black is a good color for you. So that good. I told him I could hear it. Okay, let's specific things
All right. I'm sure the candidates will visit with you after if they have time too. So let's let them make their way up. We're going to get started. Come in, you'll notice there's note cards on your seat, so be sure to write your questions that you want to ask the candidates, and then we'll have some runners. Just put your arm up with those cards and we'll get those collected. Try and get to as many questions as we can. Welcome, candidates. Sorry we brought you a rainy day in Utah-Dixie. It's usually pretty sunny, but we're glad you made it. We need the rain, so. Well, welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I know there's going to be a lot watching online as well. State convention's coming up, so well, first of all, my name is Haley Kaplan. I'm the president of the Washington County Republican Women. And our motto is be involved, be informed, and be united. So we try and give you guys an opportunity to be informed. And we've held a lot of debates and forums over the last couple of years. So we're grateful that these candidates would make it down south so that you guys can get to know them better before you cast your vote. We do meet the first Thursdays of the month, and we welcome men and women to the Republican Women Luncheon. So please join us. We'd love to have you. I want to thank our sponsors too, before I forget, the Washington County Republican Party, and then we had a couple families offer to help pay for the venue as well, the Butler family and the Ince family, a few. So thank you to them for making this possible. They're very generous. All right, we are going to open with a prayer by Pat Bradley, and then Jordan Hess will lead us in the pledge, and then we can kind of go over the rules. So Pat, if you want to join us.
Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful to meet together this evening. We're grateful to live in a free land where we can make decisions for ourselves, where our voices are heard, where we can enjoy liberty and freedom. We're grateful to gather this evening to get to know our candidates better, to understand their positions. We pray that thou will bless us to listen carefully to their answers, to carefully ponder and reflect and determine the best course as we move forward. We pray that we will be able to pass on a legacy of liberty to generations that follow. We pray that thou will bless this land and bless this state, that we will continue to enjoy freedom and liberty for years to come. These things we say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. All right, so the format that we've got tonight is we'll give them 3-minute opening statements, and then for the questions, they'll have 2 minutes. If they're named, if their opponent names them, they can do a rebuttal for 1 minute. And then, of course, closing statements at the end. So again, write your questions on those cards, and we'll just pass them up. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. We've had some delegates emailing some in as well. So, all right. Well, thank you. Let's get started. So we're going to start with opening statements. I didn't have you guys flip a coin or something. So any takers on going first, and then we'll rotate at the end. Oh, actually, these mics should work for you guys. So just pop those on. Hold that button down, and it'll turn on. And thank you to the crows. They are doing our timing, so they'll give you a heads up on your time right there too. Perfect.
Sure. If I can turn my mic. It's on the bottom.
Hold the very bottom, sorry, because you went down until that green light pops up. Okay.
Can you hear me? Yeah, yes, you can hear me. I'll stay seated. First of all, it's great to be in St. George. I always love coming over here. I love seeing the big D up on the side of the cliff there. I'm not sure what that stands for, but I like seeing it. I like seeing this flag behind me here. That makes me happy too. Most of all, I really appreciate the passion and the energy and the integrity that comes from Washington County. I said when I was out here before, Utah needs Washington County. We need a conservative base. Is that 30 seconds left? So we need Washington County. And I will say in government, I'll just, hopefully you kind of know a little bit about me and my background, so I won't go too much into that. I've got my wife Jody here with me, which I'm really grateful for her. Government tends to attract people who have ulterior motives in mind. Our founding fathers, when they put our system together, they tried to make it tyrant-proof. They tried to make it pirate-proof. They tried to get something, they could have enriched themselves, but instead they chose to create a Republican form of government, where the people would retain the power and that they would be the conscience over the government, that the people would be that collective conscience. I believe that the Republican Party has that role, that we have that mantle of the conscience of the party. I certainly know that the Democrat Party is not the conscience of America. They're not the conscience that directs us. In Utah, I've been so troubled. I've been so troubled over the course of my politics with bad policy. Wondering, why do we make such bad policies that destroy the lives of people, take away their jobs, raise their taxes, shut down their lands? In my county, we're 8% private property, the rest is public land, and all of these things became a real issue to me, which is why I ran for county commissioner, and then for the state legislature, then for the governorship. And through the process, I guess what I found is that there are literally pirates that are running some aspects of our state. And we look at what they're doing, we say, hey, why is this happening? But we don't stand up to them. In fact, we bow down to them because standing up to them comes at a price. And people recognize it. In the legislature, I was astonished. When I was up there, I looked around the room, it's like, we're grown men. We have opinions, we have feelings and thoughts, and yet we're somehow intimidated into going along with things that we would never go along with. We watched Utah's water law changed dramatically in the last few years. And it's gonna be an ugly thing when we find out all of the bad things that we did with centralizing control of the water and metering and things like that. So that's what I push back against. That's in running for governor, learned a lot of things about, what I thought the party should do, what I thought the legislature should do. And that's why I'm here. My time's up. Thank you.
Well, first off, it's fantastic to be with all of you guys. I got to drive down today, and thankfully there was a lot of water, right? Like Phil said, water is a big issue. I know down here in southern Utah, especially, you're still in critical space there. And it brings to mind, though, the different needs that we all have as Utahns. What are the needs that we have? What are the policy needs that we have? What are the community needs that we have? And ultimately, the reason that I am grateful to live in a country that has political participation is something that we're allowed to have, is because you can identify what your needs are closest to where you can then resolve the problem, and also closest to what matters most. First and foremost, that's my household. It's your household. It's our family. It's our kids. It's our grandkids. I don't have any yet. I know Phil's got a bunch. He had a new one last week. Congratulations. It's about our family. And then beyond that, it's maybe the community that you have, the neighborhood, the congregation that you worship with, who you spend time with. Maybe it's your kid's Little League team. That's where we need to be focused. And I believe that the Republican Party, somewhat uniquely, unfortunately, but the Republican Party is a place where we can find the right outcomes and find the right ideas to support our family. I have spent my life professionally fighting for families and fighting for the principles that elevate families. I did that for many years working for Senator Lee, where I focused on pro-life issues, state sovereignty and lands issues, but really, how do we elevate the family and focus and fight for those principles that can lead to the outcomes that we want? We've got a lot of work ahead of us here in Utah. And I believe that the Republican Party can continue to be a force for good. I look forward to answering your questions tonight and after and over the next couple of weeks of what are we doing, what could we be doing, what should we be doing, and what's next as we grow the Republican Party's strength and influence to make sure that Utah continues to be a place where families can thrive. So thank you again. Appreciate you guys putting this on.
All right, we'll start our first question. The Utah GOP is full of different factions. How will you work to unite them and ensure that all the voices matter? We'll start with Rob this time.
These are 1 minute.
These are 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Excellent question. The party is filled with people of all stripes and all walks of life. There are over 950,000 Utahns who declare themselves members of the Republican Party when they file their voter registration. So we have a lot of people, a lot of different perspectives. A Utah Republican may look different if it's in Washington County or over in San Juan County versus somebody in Salt Lake County or Davis County. And that needs to be okay, as long as we're focused on the principles. And those principles, gratefully, are found in a pretty unifying document. It's our party platform. So if you look to the party platform, it's just a couple of pages long. It's not all that complex. It's pretty straightforward. It talks about core things that matter to Republicans. And that's the place that I would encourage us to look to find unity, to find how we can fight for those things to move forward. Because like was mentioned, there are definitely different factions. Ultimately, I would rather engage with my family, and I include Republicans as family, on issues that matter to us than people outside of the family, right? There's times where, I'll put it this way, my kids, I've got 3 boys and a daughter, and any of you who have more than one boy realize that sometimes one day one's an alpha and the other one's not. And then the next day there's a power struggle to see who's in control of the family in that regard. Well, my boys, they have their arguments, they have their fights, but they are also one another's best champion. I want that type of example to be how Utah Republicans can be the best that we possibly can be. Let's make sure that we recognize our differences, and you can even have different opinions. You can have a preferred candidate. Maybe you're here to support Phil, maybe you're here to support me, and that's okay. As long as at the end of the day, we realize that in the family, we are better together than we are apart. We can do more together in unity on what brings us together. And luckily, just like the family has principles, so too does the party. Please read the party platform if you haven't done so recently.
When we're talking about the Republican Party, we're talking about, as Rob pointed out, 950,000 members strong. The next largest party is less than a quarter that size. Our problem is not a threat from the Democrats, it's a threat from the Republicans themselves. I look at it again, I'll talk about the elite that call the shots. They don't care. They'll pay money to the Democrats, to the Republicans, wherever. They want to control things. I call it the parasitic elite. They want stadiums. They want benefits. They want to control the water. They want to bring in policies that will give them control over the whole apparatus. It's not about the people on the left and the people on the right at that point. It's about the people that are calling the shots. And then the rest of us down at the bottom who are trying to raise honest families and have an honest living. And in the middle of that is a place that should be occupied by government and by the party to safeguard the rights of the people below them and to stand up to the people above them. What I've seen happening way too often is that we're deferring to the people above, the people with the money, the big donors, the whatever it might be, who have all of that influence. Are we afraid to offend those people at the top? So we go along with something that should be very much a government by and for the people, where the power flows from the bottom up and the money flows from the bottom up? Or is this a top-down government where the power and the money flow from the top down, and you better, do what you're supposed to, or there's going to be problems? And that's, again, it's the same issue that I was talking about before, where people feel a need to capitulate, to behave, to meet the expectations of those people that are above them, instead of standing up for the people that they should be standing up for.
This next question is, the chair represents Utah on a national level, along with our national committeeman and committeewoman. How would you represent Utah at the national level? What kind of experiences do you have to do that? Or what's your vision for that, working with the RNC? Let's see, I think we started with Rob, so let's go Phil.
Utah has an important role to play on the national scene. We really are in the spotlight for so many of these parties, and they're looking to Utah because Utah is supposed to be a conservative bastion. It's supposed to be a place that has conservative principles. And through my legislative stuff, through my county commission work, I've had a lot of interaction with the Trump administration, with the GOP administration at the top. I've gone around to the other states and in Florida and other, speaking with the GOP leadership. I'm part of a coalition, a national coalition. I've got a good friend, Keith Blanford, in South Carolina. We talk about these things all the time, the challenges they're facing. They just went through a major issue down in South Carolina where their party was basically taken over by some of this, uniparty elite group. And so he's contacting me. We're talking all the time. They're more of a 50-50 split, so they have a lot of work to do. But they said, we are looking at Utah. Utah is where we're looking right now to see how do we pattern our party so that we can accomplish the mission of the Republican Party. We saw some major things happen in the last couple of years. Trump being in office is really important to me. I think he sets the tone for the Republican Party, unlike the Governor Cox. I don't believe should set the tone for the Republican Party in Utah.
Amen.
So over the last 2 years as chairman of the party, as was mentioned, the RNC, so the National Republican Party, you have 3 representatives, a national committeeman, national committeewoman, and the chair. And so as chair, I've been able to be there and engage in our first and foremost focus the last couple of years was on getting a Republican back in the White House. And so through the last year, we were focused solely on that from the RNC perspective and the importance of that. I'm so grateful, and I count it a blessing that the United States right now does not have to wonder what it would be like to have a Kamala Harris presidency. It would be an absolute disaster. So I think that this is an example where thankfully enough people woke up, and I give thanks to God on keeping an eye out on us as a country there in the fields of Butler, Pennsylvania. I couldn't imagine the strife that we would have gone through had, heaven forbid, that day ended up a little bit differently. And so the relationships that I've been able to nurture professionally over the last 15 years in work in conservative circles and work with the Heritage Foundation, with Turning Point USA, with Senator Lee and CPI and the Trump administration, and all of these conservative focused groups, we've been able to leverage in ways that have helped the Utah Republican Party tremendously. And I believe that you need to be there to accept help, but also to give help. We have to be our brother's keeper. We were able to, this last year, go and raise funds. These were funding sources that were not cannibalizing what would have come out of Utah or been here to benefit Utah. But we knew that we had volunteers in Utah. We knew that Utahns are good at doing something called knocking doors. A lot of people, whether they're selling pest control or introducing people to their faith, Utahns like to knock doors. We were able to deploy nearly 1,000 volunteers to Arizona and Nevada, and busloads on 2 different weekends where we went and knocked doors. I took my 2 oldest sons. We worked with the Trump administration to do this. We worked with Turning Point Action and Turning Point USA. We knocked doors in Arizona. You have to have those relationships, and we work together to do things that are good for the party and for Utah.
Thank you. All right, we may need 3 minutes for this one because we're going to shift to caucus, which is big. But there's been a few questions, so I'm trying to kind of combine them. What we've seen, some frustrations last year with logistics last time around. What's your vision for caucus going forward? How are you going to strengthen the caucus convention system?
You can't let up. This is not something that you can wait and just every 2 years try to execute. You have to constantly be engaged in organizing and supporting our precinct level officers, our precinct chairs, our state delegates. If you have a vibrant, well-supported precinct level organization, it becomes a little bit easier to execute caucus. If that then builds to a successful caucus, it's easier and more vibrant and exciting to go through that convention cycle process of vetting candidates and giving them the support that they need. So the caucus convention system is one that I wholeheartedly support. I have never not supported it, and I have never watered down my opposition to SB 54, which I see as a direct attack against the vibrancy of the best system of Republican form of government that I'm aware of anywhere in the country. There is nothing that comes close to this. All of you are here, by and large, because of the caucus convention system. You serve as state delegates, you serve as precinct chairs. You mentioned last year, so in Salt Lake County, a couple of other counties, there were some logistical issues and there were some challenges. The caucus is executed by counties, and it's a state party facilitated function. But what is the right answer for Washington County is going to be different than the right answer for Cache County. And the right answer even in Salt Lake County might look a little bit different than the right answer in Utah County. But I'm a big believer you have to learn the lessons that were easy lessons and good lessons and replicate those, but you also have to be willing to learn the lessons that come difficult or with difficulty. So the caucus in places last year where there were too many people and logistically we needed to improve, you have to be willing to learn those lessons. And we've done a good job of trying to compile all of those as best practices in coordination with the counties. But I truly believe that this system of government, in spite of the attack that has come 10 years ago from our legislature and is trying to hinder this process, we can overcome that by continually and sincerely working together. So let's talk about next steps. So next steps, we need to build again on what worked last year and prepare for what didn't work. And I believe that starts this summer. We have municipal elections this summer. Now, municipal elections might not have an R or a D next to the name, but the people in those offices who will ultimately be the nominees either believe in the Republican Party platform or they don't. And I believe a well-organized precinct and well-organized conversations by all of you will help find the right candidates who support Republican principles, and we see those people be elevated onto the city councils. If we organize this summer around the municipal elections, do social type events, provide the necessary information and encouragement and training, we will be prepared for a well-executed, well-planned, and effective caucus. And we will see many of you continue, and like we saw last time, we will see a lot of people who their first experience in the Utah Republican Party is as delegates, and I think that's a beautiful thing to witness.
So I'll quote Stephen Covey when he said, things that matter most must never be at the mercy of things that matter least. When we talk about our caucus system, that is the apparatus. That's the apparatus that the GOP takes responsibility for, that the chair takes responsibility for, that the SCC takes responsibility for. We say this is the Republican form of government. It starts at the neighborhood level. It starts in your communities. I remember growing up as a kid. My older sister would babysit while mom and dad went to caucus. Everybody went to caucus. It was talked about. It was an important thing. Now, last year we went to caucus. We stayed a long time. I was grateful for that. I was grateful for the patriotism. I thought it was a great experience. I've always said, ask not what the party can do for you, ask what you can do for the party, and I'm in 100%. But we chose candidates there, some very important elections that took place, and then our will at the convention was completely overridden by SB 54, we'll say. SB 54 is a bill that was passed in 2014. We don't talk too much about SB 207 that was passed the next year, which basically tried to correct all of the problems of SB 54, and then there's been a lot of bills since then. So SB 54 is a little bit of a misnomer because that code section has been changed quite a bit since then. The whole purpose of SB 54 was to create an end run around our system. You go get signatures, you can do an end run. But what if your signatures aren't valid? Who's going to stand up and check those signatures? Is the party going to step forward and say, this is our Republican Party, this is our Republican primary, and we can't even look at the signatures, we can't even look at our own voter rolls, we can't look at the results of our own primary election? That is a system that's been turned on its head deliberately by people who want to usurp our Republican primary system. When that happens, then you get people going to caucus saying, what's the point? I'm gonna put in all this time, I'm gonna put in all this effort, and those of you who are precinct chairs know it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, or county chairs. A tremendous amount of investment goes into this, and if after all of that work and all of that effort, if our voice is just disregarded, we would hope that the party itself would put those things that matter most ahead of those things that matter least, and they would go and work with the lieutenant governor. They would push those principles and those things and demand that we have a review of signatures. We had a court case in 2016, and the judge said, we're not telling the Republican Party how they can run their elections. It's your Republican Party. You do it the way that you want. You've got to stand up for yourselves. It's not the courts who are pushing this. Basically telling us if the Republican Party wants to assert itself, it has to assert itself. It can't just comply with everything. And that goes not just for the signature gathering or for the convention system itself, but for the primary election itself. We should be able to look at those things.
Thank you. All right, we had SB 54 was brought up. We had a couple cards that asked this same question. So, if you're elected, will you certify the party as QPP or RPP or non-participating in primary? What are the advantages or disadvantages of each that you see for the party going forward?
Can't remember who went first. Yeah, I think it's you.
So qualified political party, we are a qualified political party. According to code section 20A9407, that oversees what is a qualified political party. The Republican Party of Utah is not trying to get qualified. We did that long ago, and we got the membership. We are a qualified political party. And this was that court case came to is as a qualified political party, we don't have to go and conform to anything. It's still our party. We are still a Republican Party. Now, the legislature has tried to convince us that the legislature, if we don't do what they want, will take away our caucus system. That's exactly what it said in an article a couple of weeks ago from Kurt Bramble, who is a dear friend of mine, by the way. And he said, yeah, if Phil is successful, it's going to result in the legislature taking away that caucus system. Well, they can't take away the right of association. They can't take away free association. They might think they can, but we're guaranteed the freedom of association through the Constitution, and that's where we can start looking to the federal government. If the state's going to take that away, if the legislature or the lieutenant governor is going to try to take that away, we do start looking to the federal government, to Pam Bondi or Kash Patel or somebody to say, hey, something is happening in Utah that is not right. This is not the way you treat an association that has all the rights that come with being a Republican Party. So SB 54 gets talked about a lot. But in 2024, We were talking about a person who didn't qualify through SB 54 because they didn't get their signatures, and we wouldn't even look into that. The party wouldn't even look into that.
So in the last couple of answers, there's been a few things that I feel I need to address. First and foremost, before any signature verification requests came from any candidate, they came from the Republican Party. So implying that the Republican Party did not try to assert itself in its own process is inaccurate. Like candidates that requested that, we were denied, and we appealed that, and we were denied and appealed and denied again. But I don't take no for an answer. You figure out how to move forward, even when you're running against a law that is preventing you from fully exerting what is the authority and the purpose of the party. And so we work with the legislature. I have spent countless hours with many legislators. I've spent countless hours in conversations pushing back against this gubernatorial administration or the lieutenant governor's office where I felt that they were wrong or interpreting things incorrectly. And you push for that. So let me tell you a couple of things that we've accomplished. This last legislative session, in addressing SB 54, the issue of signatures is brought up. Well, when you actually identify the problem and come up with solutions, you can get it fixed. So now candidates can review the signature petitions for people running in a race that they are in. So no longer could the withheld status of a person's voter registration be used as an excuse not to see that signature. We also have the ability, through engagement and demanding this with the legislature, that the party can now be a participant in that. So no longer the experience of last year will be playing out. I also want to point out this idea that has been portrayed that the party needs to be willing to stand up against those above them. Well, let me point something out. You've probably never met somebody with the last name Axson. I don't come from a politically connected family. I don't come from a wealthy family. I'm a nobody. But the caucus convention system allowed a young kid to get involved in politics. And the principles of our United States Constitution and the platform of our party allowed me to stay involved in politics. And I had the privilege then of finding a candidate who espoused what I believed, and I worked with him to get him elected through the caucus convention system, and no longer do we have a well-connected United States senator from a prominent family. But instead you had somebody who came in, I guess Senator Lee is still from a prominent family, but he went through the grassroots with all of our help, and we got him elected. This system matters. Any type of inference that I am not committed to this system and have not done everything in my power to fight for the repeal of SB 54 and strengthening the caucus convention system is not accurate. I do believe that it's important to ask, what are the things that you are unwilling to do? Am I willing to push back against a governor? Yes, I am. Have I done it? Yes, I have. Am I willing to break the law? No, I'm not. If you want somebody who's going to break the law, I'm not your guy. And I'm not saying that Phil is going to break the law. I'm just saying that's not me. I'm not going to do that because it's my reputation and it's your reputation as Republicans.
You mentioned your name, so we'll give you guys another minute if you want.
Well, I'll mention his name too, because
You both could have another minute on that one.
Rob and I go back a long ways, and we fought some really important fights. I'm a huge admirer, fan, appreciative of everything that he's done, along with Senator Lee. In the 2024 election, you could still look at signatures. Anybody could look at their opponent's signatures, right up until we asked to look at the governor's signatures. Then it was, oh, no, there's a law that says you can't. Oh, those are withheld records, all these things. When you sign a petition, you do not have the expectation of privacy. And the laws initially indicated that. These signature petitions, these nominating petitions are the exact same as a flag petition. You do not have the expectation of privacy. So what the legislature did is they came back and they started to panic and recreate some bills and some laws that would affect that, to basically cover what they did in 2024, which is denied one candidate access to that information. Now, we filed a lawsuit. I would love to have had Rob on the lawsuit. We talked about it. I said I'd rather have you on as a amicus than as a defendant on this. That didn't happen. It would have made a huge difference, and I wish that the party would have joined on that because it's not my primary. It belongs to the Republican Party.
Again, what was done in 2024? I think these are important questions for all of you candidates, or excuse me, delegates to ask and to understand what candidates were supported and what candidates were not supported. I am the 5th chairman in the 5th election cycle since SB 54 went into effect. There were 4 election cycles that occurred prior to my time as chairman, and 0 effort was given to delineate between convention winners and non-convention winners post-convention. 6 years ago, I authored a bylaw to the party that said after the convention, between there and the primary, we would lean into and articulate and inform the public and the Republicans what the delegates chose. And we did that. So from a high watermark of 0 resources provided in 4 election cycles over 8 years to last year, $250,000. So if you talk about putting your money where your mouth is, I have been committed to supporting our convention winners, including this convention winner. He had my full support clear to the convention, clear to the primary, and I wish that every single one of our convention winners made it past the finish line. Some came up short, but we closed the gap. The party is stronger today than it has been in any time since SB 54.
So we can spend all night on that. We're going to shift gears a little bit though. Let's talk about fundraising. What specifically will you do to raise funds for the party, and how will you use those funds? Let's see. Yeah, I think it's wrong.
Fundraising has to be a priority, but not because the fundraising is the goal. It's the vehicle to accomplish the goals. The goals are getting our precincts organized. The goals are bringing in young people into the party and communicating the party principles to a broader swath of Utahns. The goals are winning elections. The goals are having the data and the staff and the structure necessary to be successful. Those are the goals. They all cost money. You have to be able to raise funds. I am very pleased and grateful to all of the support that I received over the last 2 years to make sure that we had the funding necessary to make progress. So we have to build line upon line, success upon success. So over the last 2 years, we were able to raise $3 million. Over $2 million of that was specifically to be used here in Utah. 800 or so thousand was raised in conjunction with President Trump's campaign, the NRSC, the NRCC, and then helping a couple of our convention-winning candidates who signed on to a joint fundraising agreement. Mike Kennedy being one of them. We were able to raise him an additional $55,000 or $58,000 through that vehicle. But funding has to be there. I'll tell you something else that I think there's the assumption that, you get only the money from the top. You have to get money from both ends. If somebody's giving a $5 donation, you take it. If somebody's giving a $500 donation, you take it. But what you never do, and not once have I ever done this, you never water down your commitment to the principles. If strings are attached to any donation, I have turned it away. Not once have I accepted that. And I would encourage any chair in the county or on the state level to do that same thing. You don't have strings attached to that commitment. The other thing that I decided to do 2 years ago, because of my time serving with Senator Lee and working on his re-election campaigns, I saw the time where the party would come to candidates or they would come to elected officials to pay for their operations. And so you kind of start to wear out your welcome if the only time you're hearing from the party is, hey, we need to pay a bill. So I made the decision not to raise any money from elected officials. So there was no money given to the party from elected officials outside of like if they were sponsoring a table at convention, it's the same cost as if anybody did that. We did not go to any of them to raise money. A lot of the traditional folks who have used money against the party for years and years that have promoted the Count My Vote efforts and other things, we didn't raise any money from them. Now, if they want to give money to the party, more power to them. But as long as I am party chair, they need to know that that money will come with 0 strings, and the only thing that that money will be used for is to make sure to promote the platform of the Utah Republican Party, to build our success, to strengthen our caucus convention system, and make sure that the party can be transferred and that baton can be passed to the next generation of Utahns. My commitment as party chair is to set new high water marks and beat our own records of the last 2 years.
It's always interesting. There we go. Sorry. It's always interesting to have a money discussion. And I guess coming from my background as a CPA, working with a lot of successful businesses, I found that people who don't have money talk a lot about money. People who have money understand that it's a tool. It's used, as Rob said, to accomplish certain things. We've got 950,000 registered Republicans in Utah, yet so much of our donations are coming from a handful of people at the top. It should be the other way around. It should be coming from the grassroots. It should be coming up. I've had this discussion with Rob myself. I struggle to give money to the party when I feel like it's supporting moderate candidates or it's not standing up for some of those principles that are important to me. And I think if we go, I'd rather have 100,000 people donating $10 than 10 people donating $100,000. And I think it does have an effect on the party. And I think there is an expectation when some of these large donors come and make big donations. There is an expectation, whether there's strings attached or not, there are expectations. I put out a post a couple of days ago, and a friend of mine, I was working with the Navajo Trust Fund. Utah legislature said, we're not doing this anymore, we're not managing your trust fund. And so we set up, and I said, well, we should manage it ourselves. I wasn't in an elected office, I was just a CPA. And we were working so hard to get this $78 million in the hands of the Utah Navajo so they could manage their own trust fund, and it was contentious and fighting and stuff going on. And John Ray Billy, the chapter president of the Anna chapter, a classmate of mine from childhood, we went to breakfast, and he said, I'd rather see that money put on a rocket ship and shipped to the moon than continue the contention. We want our land and we want our kids to live free lives. That's what we want as well. And I told my people in my campaign over and over, and I think it was frustrating to some people in my campaign that I was not more focused on raising money, but I said at the beginning, we'll have all the money we need. If we don't have any money, it's because we don't need any money. But what we found, and I said, what we want is the hearts and minds of the people. We want a message that resonates with people. We have people contacting us, calling, where can I donate? How can I give some money to what you're doing? I appreciate you so much for standing up. I guarantee we would have the same thing in the Republican Party. With 900,000 members, raising $1 million, raising $10 million should not be a Herculean effort. The other thing on this is, rather than trying to put together a war chest to go and file a lawsuit, if we stood up for ourselves and forced the state to sue us, then we would find out the commitment of the members of the Republican Party to stand up for themselves, and that would be a better approach.
All right, there are several things on the agenda for state convention, constitutional amendments, bylaw amendments. There's been a few questions on that. This one's specifically asking about the proposed bylaw change stating an elected official would not be able to run for the SEC. Do you support this? I'm also going to add if there's anything else on that agenda that you want to bring up that you're supporting or not supporting, if you want to touch on those. Let's see, we're at Phil.
So being a CPA, independence is everything. If you go to work for a firm and your cousin is on the board of one of their companies, they will remove you from that CPA firm because independence means so much in that field. Same thing with board of directors. When you have a board of directors, you look for people who do not have a conflict of interest, who are not, doing something to look after an interest outside the interest of the board itself. Now, the SEC is a board. They are the board of the Utah Republican Party. They oversee all of Utah. Even SEC members that come from Washington County are making decisions that affect all of Utah. So it makes sense if you're going to have a policy or a bylaw that addresses independence or conflict of interest, that it be universal and across the board. Some SEC members brought this up. An SEC member wrote up a bylaw that said that they wanted to see independence. They wanted to do away with the conflict of interest. And their approach was to say no elected officials could also be SEC members. I'm not oblivious to the fact that we have great SEC members who are elected officials. But it doesn't mean that we couldn't have great SEC members who are not elected officials. And that's what that bylaw proposed. I do support it. I support the SEC in their responsibility. And I think if you got rid of the potential conflicts of interest with the SEC, I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't think it's a bad bylaw. And it's certainly not a bad bylaw to discuss and to have come up for all the state delegates.
So apologies, I'm not gonna be able to speak to the specifics of this because as chair, I can't weigh in, since I'll be chairing the meeting where these are discussed, I can't weigh in specifically in favor or opposition to any of these. So I'm gonna answer the question more broadly. And I think first and foremost, it's important to recognize Republicans, delegates, it's your voice. You guys get to elevate the candidates you want to elevate at convention. We did that, right? We did that with Phil. Phil was the preferred gubernatorial candidate for the delegates. We elevated that voice. It's the same with these issues that will be discussed. You will have the opportunity as delegates to look at it, to see the pros and cons. You ultimately need to make that decision. Where I would like to see the party go, and again, I don't mean this to speak to any of these specifically, but I'll just tell you the world view that I have. And I think it comes from being the son of a single mom and growing up in a single mom household and having a dad who was a very leftist leaning Canadian. And his politics and my politics are very far away. And I've shared in the past that like people say, oh, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Well, my dad's tree must have been planted on a very steep, long hill. And as the apple, I just keep rolling farther and farther away from my dad. But you learn that you love somebody and you learn that you can have a difference of opinion. And I believe there's far more to be done bringing people together and winning converts than can ever be done by chasing people away and limiting participation. I also believe in the idea of transparency that Phil mentioned. I think transparency is fantastic. Let's have transparency. I think anybody should be able to answer the hard questions, say where they're at, say what they believe in. If they want to run for office, whether it's within the party or as a candidate for elected office, lay it out there, where you come from, what is your backing. It's why I even love like on disclosures, and we talked about fundraising just for everybody's awareness. I have to file reports every month. So you can look and see every dollar spent and every dollar brought in by the Utah Republican Party over the last 2 years. There's 2 accounts. You'll need to look at the state account and you can look at the federal account. On the federal account, there are limits based off of FEC rules. You will see transparently where everything is. So these ideas that, yes, we should be discussing, and you as delegates will have the opportunity to discuss these at the state convention. And we shouldn't shy away from debate and discussion. I'm excited to have it. But I would hope that we would think of creative ideas to elevate transparency rather than purity tests. I would rather that the Utah Republican Party looks a lot more like the Utahns that go all over the world trying to win converts, rather than the Spanish Inquisition, which we have seen in history. Both tried to communicate Jesus, one does it better than the other.
Thank you. Yes, remember to go through and read those. I printed them out in this folder for myself because there's quite a few on there, but before you get, don't just wait till state convention to get there and read through those proposals because you'll want to kind of have your head wrapped around it and then hear the debate and participate that way. So thank you for that. All right, next question. Are we doing okay? We got a little more time in us. Okay. Yeah, drink water. Okay, our next one is going to talk about the Republican platform. So that's something we can all unite on. Do you have a favorite part of the platform? And is there anything you maybe don't agree with fully on that you want to let the delegates know?
There is nothing in the Utah Republican Party platform that I disagree with. I wholeheartly agree with all of it. Obviously, there's the pro-family, there's the pro-life, the pro-Second Amendment. I love all of those traditional elements. I also like that in Utah, we focus on things like federalism and state sovereignty. I know those are issues that I care deeply about, but I know Phil cares deeply about those issues. I'm very grateful for that. So where I have no objections, 0 objections with the Utah Party platform, I'm going to pivot and talk a little bit about my experience last year on the national platform. And I wholeheartedly understand President Trump's desire to simplify our national platform. And I understand his campaign's effort to remove some of these controversial issues and focus on things that would help him win an election. I'm grateful for that. But I'll tell you, it was quite surprising that when the platform that has to work its way through the RNC, 168 members, I'm one of those members, when it had to work its way through the RNC before then going on to the platform committee, before being adopted by the national delegates at the national convention, as it simplified, a lot of really good stuff came out. There was stuff about Utah's lands and federal land management that disappeared that I wish never did. But the one that dismayed me is we completely watered down our commitment to life and our pro-life effort. And I'll tell you, there were a handful of us in the RNC that fought vigorously against that. I am pleased to have, in partnership with Brad Bonham, our national committee man, be 2 of maybe 5 people who did not take no for an answer and had a lot of awkward and difficult conversations. And I found it interesting. There's times as I'm a member of the largest faith here in Utah, and sometimes those of us who are members of that, we're all used to being accused by others of not being Christian. And that's okay. We learn how to answer those questions. But I'll tell you, it was a point of pride to be a Mormon boy back in Wisconsin with another member of my faith who were unabashedly and unashamed in the fact that we thought we were taking a mistaken step forward and that we had to be better as Republicans. And if you want to simplify the language, if you want to be more inclusive, okay, we can do that, but you don't build inclusivity where things are wrong. I believe in what Frederick Douglass has said. It's one of my favorite people in American history, and he has a quote that says, "I will stand with anybody who does right, and I will stand with nobody who does wrong." And I am one who believes that the issue of life, that's what qualifies us for God's blessing or not. And if we are not careful in that space, regardless of where we fall in the specifics, just blanket statement, if we are not qualifying for God's blessing by believing in the sanctity of life, there's not a future that I want to be involved in without God's blessing.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Rob, for taking that stand back there. That was an astonishing turn to see the National Republican Party moving in that direction. So thank you for your advocacy on that. I do want to say, just, and I'll tie this into the platform as well, but a bylaw that addresses conflict of interest is not a purity test. It's simply a bylaw that addresses conflict of interest. It's not a purity test, and it's not at all what it comes across as. So we shouldn't refer to something as a purity test when actually it's just talking about conflict of interest. Which brings me maybe to, I guess, a central part of the platform that really resonates with me is individual freedom. Everything else is built upon that individual freedom. And the Declaration of Independence, really highlights that by virtue of our birth, we're entitled to certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Our bylaws echo that, and it reaffirms personhood, it reaffirms parenthood, that parents are responsible for their children, that families are central to our society. All of those things are so important in Utah, and they're in the platform. Education is a big part that's in the platform. It says the parents have a role in educating their children. This is such an important thing when we start having some of the debates going on with the legislatures making rules and laws, and UEA's weighing in, and you got people from outside the country coming in. It's important to come back and recognize that parents have that first right. Back during COVID, I spent an hour on the phone with a woman over in Kanab who was in her principal's office. And I said, well, let me talk to him. And I talked to him and I said, hey, she's got more authority over her child than you do. And I got the superintendent all the way up to the head of the health department who agreed with me 100%, get that child in the classroom. Give the waiver, whatever it takes to put her in the classroom without a mask on. Let's do that. But we were going through this weird gyration of, well, the legislature says we can. I said, well, I'm in the legislature. I don't think that's at all what this is intended to do. And I told the superintendent, I promise you that mother has more authority over that little girl than all of the school board and all of the superintendents. That's by virtue of being a person, by virtue of being a parent. We take those responsibilities, and if the party doesn't defend that, then it's not doing its job. I will say one of the guiding mantras of my life has been that honest people have rights too, and the only hope they have is that other honest people will stand up when those rights are being threatened. And in no place is that more apparent than in the life of an unborn child. The most innocent person, the most innocent individual who can't advocate for themselves. And if we don't advocate for those babies, then heaven help us at some point down the road.
Thank you. All right, next question is, we've had several conservative Republican-supported laws, like our abortion ban, that have been stopped with the courts. If anything is, what can the party do to combat some of that judicial activism and overreach?
Well, our judges are appointed by the governor, so first of all, might be getting a governor who appoints conservative judges and holds them to that. The other thing, again, the Republican Party is the 800-pound gorilla in Utah, and we don't flex our muscle. We act like we're the subjects of the courts, of the legislature. I'm not about breaking laws, and I don't break laws, but I do challenge laws that need to be challenged, and we have to challenge those laws. So when we talk about courts that step in and overturn legislation, that's between the legislative and the judicial branch. But there is another very important part of that equation, and that's the people. And that comes in the form of the Republican Party. We stand up and say, we're not going to put up with this. We're not going to sit by while a judge overrides our abortion ban and 6,000 babies are killed in that meantime. There's no way that the party can justify having taken a passive approach to that, saying, gosh, we really wish this wasn't the case. Good luck, legislature. You should go fight them. We are the 800-pound gorilla. We should flex our muscle. And I think we do it far too little. And that comes back to understanding the reality. I always say that the most powerful force in the world is realization. When you realize that you are the Republican Party and that the consequences of not filling that space are dire, especially when we're talking about some of these issues, then we say, we better fill that space. And that's why we organize. That's why we get together and we put together the SEC so that we can talk about these things and we can come forward with the actual policies, proposals, and influence to make these changes that are needed.
I think there is a tremendous vulnerability that we have as a state right now that we have to be prepared for, and the party certainly plays an important role and needs to continue to play an important role in pushing back against this, and that is the judicial activism that we're seeing here in Utah. I'm grateful to some bold leadership, and I'm grateful to some of the efforts that have been given by some of our legislators. So for example, there was some law changes in the code that removed the Utah Bar Association from being the gatekeeper on the judicial nominations. So regardless of who the governor was in the past, you had this gatekeeper from a very liberal organization that was approving the list. And then you're picking from a list that met their approval. I don't want the Bar Association's approval. I want the approval of the people who have the majority vote here in Utah and the principles that we have as Republicans and as conservatives. So Senator Kurt Collimore, he led the charge on that. I know Brady Graham or a handful of folks in the legislature have done a good job. And we need to support those individuals when they're trying to rein in what had been this march in our legislative process that had further empowered radical activism within the courts. We have to push back against that. We all saw last year where the state Supreme Court came out with a ruling that completely changed the interpretation of our state constitution to further empower the idea of initiatives. So before, the people could go through an initiative process, or through their elected representatives, they could have a law that was passed into law through the legislature. They have now said that if the initiative goes through, the legislature can't change that. Well, we're a republic, guys. Like, giving this idea of a direct democracy, having an ability to pass something where a Republican form of government has no ability to make changes or adjustments or repeal that, is extremely detrimental. This is now inviting ongoing funding that will be coming into Utah, that will try to turn Utah into what you see in California. In the entire country, this interpretation only exists to this degree in 3 states. There's 22 or 3 states out of our 50 that allow for ballot initiatives. Only 3, Arizona, Utah now, and California, give it this type of interpretation. We have to be careful. We have a Better Boundary Initiative and ruling that we're waiting on. If that comes back in a way that is unfavorable, we will likely have new congressional districts drawn. Imagine, they can do it in one of 2 ways. because I doubt they're gonna keep with the status quo, right? When you give a leftist group an opportunity to do something, they tend to do something with it, and usually there's funding from George Soros tied to expectation to do something. So they're not gonna keep it the same. They can either turn one of our 4 congressional districts into a solid blue district, in which case we'll have 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat. The one that I'm actually more afraid of, make 2 solid Republican districts and 2 blue-leaning districts, and suddenly Utah could be a 50-50 state. We have to push back against this.
All right, thank you. We're getting close on time, so let's try to squeeze in, how about 2 more, and then our closing statements. So this next question goes to, there's a few that have written, so I'm trying to combine language. But can you speak to your relationship with our current legislature and executive branch, and how you can be an influence, the party can be an influence to work with those individuals in the legislature and the governor's office?
Yeah, excellent question. You have to have a seat at the table. It's important to have that, but you don't necessarily need to be at every single table. And I'll tell you that there are legislators with whom I have an excellent relationship, and the party has an excellent relationship. There are others that are a little bit lukewarm. And well, luckily one of those, he's no longer a Republican, so he can go and do his own thing in another party, and more power to him, God bless. But for the most part, here in our legislature, we have some really good men and women, and many of them are to the left of me within the party. But again, back to that Frederick Douglass statement, when somebody's doing right, you can stand with them. When they're not doing something right, you don't stand with them, and you share your opinion, and you work tirelessly to change that. During this last legislative session, I worked closely with Washington County, with Davis County, with Salt Lake County, with Utah County, with Summit County, Weber County, and Tooele County. Those were the ones that spent the most time with us, but we opened it up to other county chairs and leadership teams as well. We were there at the legislative session advocating for and fighting for every single good bill to be better or to get past the finish line. And when a bill wasn't quite there yet, we tried to get it there. But there were bad bills too that we had to push against. My focus this last legislative session was anything on election integrity, anything on transparency, anything generally on elections with signatures and anything else. That's where we were focused. So we did a lot of tremendous work. There was a couple of bills, and one bill in particular, that we almost got where it needed to be. But when you have a relationship with folks that's trusted, that even if you disagree, they can trust you. They know you're not going to throw them under the bus. You can get to a place where you can do hard things. Second or third night before the end of the session, this bill was clearly not going to get where it needed to be. And I'll tell you, had it gotten where it needed to be, this would have solved just about every issue that we have as a party as it pertains to election law, and would have been the best thing for the party, second only to the repeal of SB 54. This would have been a phenomenal bill. And we got it 80-90% of the way there. But because of the relationship that we had when it wasn't quite there, we knew that if we passed it, it would lock into place a couple of other things that would have been a disaster for the party. I was able to talk to the sponsor in both the House and the Senate, and they pulled it. And we're going to continue to work on that. You have to have these relationships. It goes with the state school board. We have Joanne Britton here, one of our school board members. You have to work with them on good policies. Certainly all of our state agencies, there's a lot of good men and women doing really good work. Some of those are folks at the head. Some of them are just people that are working on issues that, again, tie to our platform. And that's what you have to look to, is what are the issues that tie to our platform, support them. When they don't, it's either not our business or you need to work against it if it's opposed to our platform. As it pertains to the governor's office, my style is always to be cordial. My style is always to find the places where we can agree, but also you stand firmly against those places where you disagree. He and I are friendly, but I have, I'm not in close contact with the governor, and we have different priorities.
So a few years ago, I was a county commissioner, and I took some stands. The second time I ran for county commissioner, I stood up and I said, I didn't run for county commissioner to make friends, and so far it's working. And sometimes if your purpose is to make friends, you're doing the wrong thing, but some people are. They're in it for it's like a country club, and you go to lunch and you go to these things. But I understand what it means to be a county commissioner. I understand what it means to take on the federal government, to take on the Sierra Club, to take on the Southern Utah Waters Alliance, the Rural Utah Project, all of these environmentalist groups. I understand what it is to get prosecuted maliciously by a federal government, to spend $400,000 in your own legal defense, to go through a kangaroo court, 4 judges recusing. I've watched this for 14 months of my life. Jody was there with me. I know what the inside of a jail cell looks like. I know what prison food tastes like. I know what these things are about. By the way, Washington County, you've got a very nice facility out there, the Purgatory Correctional Facility. And I told the sheriff that while I was there. But all these things give you experience. And then getting up to the legislature and working with these people. A few years ago, I went into one of our day-long work meetings, and I said, look, we are talking about some really important things here, but have any of you paid attention to what BlackRock is doing with these natural asset corporations? Have you looked at this? They value the planet at $4 quadrillion. And I gave a little bit of a lecture on this, and I showed them, and Ken Ivory came up afterwards. Can you tell me more about this? That was an important thing. That's one of those things that matter most. If we're not paying attention to the people that are basically buying the state right out from under us, and they're doing it with money from China. People say, well, we don't want to sell land to China. It's like, well, where do you think BlackRock's getting all of its money? It's like most of our housing is owned by BlackRock. All of these things. So it may be a little bit to Rob's point. When people are doing the wrong thing, they need someone that will stand up and tell them the truth. And I think I had that reputation with my colleagues. I was up there for 6 years. Dear friends, when I left there, I told them all, I love you guys. I appreciate what you're doing. And I appreciate the opportunity I've had to rub shoulders with you. I meant it, and I still have friends up there. When I go up to the legislature, I go and I visit my friends, and I talk to people. I understand how the sausage is made. I understand where the lobbyists come in and where the influence is coming to the speaker and how all that dynamic works, which is a huge advantage, I think, coming as a party chair, to be able to go up there and talk to them in the language that they understand. But my purpose would not be to go up there and to make friends. My purpose would be to go up there and to speak the truth. If we're speaking the truth, we can disagree better all day long. But if we're not talking about the truth, then there is no disagree better, and there's got to be someone who demands some accountability from those people, and they do it with each other. I've gone the rounds with Dan McKay on things, and we come back and we call each other and we laugh and we're friends outside of some of those conflicts. And I believe that you can do that, but more important than being liked is telling the truth.
All right, thank you. Our time is flying by. Let's go with this last question, and then if your question didn't get answered, I'm sure they're willing to talk with you after or get a call with them. This person's just talking about how there's a discrepancy between the convention vote and the primary vote. What's your vision going forward to make this more aligned, to help our primary voters and get our convention winners to the finish line? If that makes sense. So let's see, who are we starting with, Phil?
Yeah, so contrary to a lot of belief, the convention is part of our primary process. That is part of the primary for the Republican Party. And the Republican Party says, we're going to put forward a candidate, or 2 candidates if 2 come out of convention. We're going to put forward good candidates to be considered as Republicans on the ballot on the general ballot come November. And so whatever process we go through is our process. And the reason that you have people that are coming through convention with a vastly different experience after convention in the primary election is because so many people, so many delegates at the convention are not really engaged, and so many candidates are not engaged. We had a governor that came and told the delegates that their opinions didn't matter, that their vote didn't matter, he was going to win no matter what. That's a huge conflict. Now, in that situation, he'll come out and say, yeah, well, I did win, 54 to 46%. I challenged that figure, and I challenged it the night before. And I wish the party would say, we want the cast vote records, we want the voter rolls, we want to do a statistical analysis of our own. But despite that, the disconnect that's happening from the delegates, again, comes back to SB 54, feeling like they're not valid, they're not effective in their responsibilities, and then providing us an end run around that. If we have a candidate come out of convention with over 60%, that person goes to the general ballot, period, end of story. I'm quoting Governor Cox when I say that. That's what he said, period, end of story. That person is on the general ballot. If we would adhere to that, if we force that, it would change the whole dynamic. Now, the money that gets spent outside of convention, after convention you go and you've got a person who says, I'm not even gonna go through convention, I'm just gonna get my signatures, I've got all the money in the world, and I'm gonna do ads and billboards and all of those things. They have a huge advantage. That's why we have a caucus system. That's why we have the grassroots system coming up, is so that ordinary people like you and I can talk to our neighbors, can get the nomination, can become the Republican candidate for that office, and not have to worry about this big money game that's being played. In our platform and in our constitution, we say that we're going to oppose ranked choice voting, and we have to oppose ranked choice voting. We support or we oppose universal mail-in ballots, and we should oppose universal mail-in ballots. The only reason we have all those things is basically to circumvent the will of the people, and that's what happens when you come to the primary election. Is basically somebody through money, through imagination, through whatever, has circumvented the party, and they come up with a result that's very different from the party's will.
So the delegate process, again, is a phenomenal process. How many hours of time are spent by all of you vetting candidates? And you have not just one race, right? There's a bunch of races: congressional race, Senate race, school board race, commission race. There's all of these things, and especially if you're serving as both a county and a state delegate, you might have a lot of races that you're having to vet. And yet, phenomenal interactions happen, and the candidates are better prepared, and the topics of conversation elevate through the caucus convention system. And I believe that the ultimate candidates who win are better prepared to be elected officials. Now, my preference is that those individuals were the ones that came out of our convention, because they've done the work, they've put in all of that time and that energy and that effort. You look, since SB 54, it undermines that process in tremendous ways, because it still is there. We still can benefit from it. But how many of your neighbors say, well, I'm not going to caucus, I'm not going to be a state delegate because what does it matter? Like, my preferred candidate is getting signatures. Or maybe they hate signatures and they're like, what does it matter? My preferred candidate is working their tail off in the convention and they still have to face a signature path candidate. That's the perniciousness of SB 54, where before everybody came through our process and was vetted and improved along the way. And we as delegates and as Utahns found really good men and women to represent the party. And it created that spirit of accountability. I mentioned earlier tonight that for the first time in the time since SB 54 went into effect, 5 election cycles, for the first time we leaned in. So the high water mark, $0 in resources, 0 attention provided to the convention winners, 0 effort of educating Republican voters in the primary of who the convention winners were. We deployed $250,000 last year. And with that, you have an interesting example here. 2016, the convention winner, the person with the highest score, went up against an incumbent governor. Yet when they went to the primary, the spread of that race when the incumbent governor won was 44 points. Well, look at what we've done this last year. And kudos to Phil and the race that he ran, but he won at convention, came out of there, ran a good campaign, and the party stepped up in partnership with our county parties, in partnership with all of you, and that gap went down to 8%. That shows that the party is moving in a direction of elevating itself so that we have more ability to be a force multiplier, to make sure that we are educating all of our elected officials on the benefits, and all of our candidates on the benefits of engaging with delegates. And we are helping all of you keep elected officials who want to represent you accountable. This is an important process. Money and name ID in every state, in every race, are very hard to surmount. Here in Utah, through the caucus convention system, we were able to overcome that in most of our races. There were 6 races where we fell short of that, but if we keep focusing on it, we can close that gap further and ultimately prevail.
All right, thank you. We're gonna let these guys close it out with any closing remarks you'd like to have. Let's see, did we start with Phil last time? So let's.
He starts too.
Okay, perfect, thank you. 3 minutes.
Well, thank you. It's been really great to come and just talk about these things, and we could talk about so many more things, and there's a lot of nuances. I told this little story at Utah County when I was up there, but a construction worker who every day would come to lunch, and he'd come for his lunch hour and open up his lunchbox, pull out a sandwich, take a bite, and say, tuna fish again. And after a couple of weeks of this, his coworker said, hey, you should talk to your wife. I'm sure she'd make you a different kind of sandwich. And he said, well, that won't help. And he said, well, why not? Because I make my own lunch. and in reality, we have the same thing going on when we have complaining going on. This is our government. This is our country. This is America. And we have the opportunity as a Republican Party to dictate the course that we want to take. We could choose our candidate by a dance contest if we wanted to. There's nothing that says that the state legislature can dictate to the Utah Republican Party how they are going to choose their candidates or what process they're going to go through. If we wanted to go a jungle primary, the Republican Party could say, we're going to open up our whole process and have an open primary election. We could do that. We could make that choice, but we haven't made that choice. What we've said is that we are going to have a convention system, a caucus system, and we need to stay true to that because it's what is in our bylaws and our Constitution. I love the idea of, as I look at the parties, I look at all of the precincts, all of the structure from the ground all the way up. We have all of those things in place. I had this conversation with Rob actually before the convention. I said, why don't we just do our own primary? And he said, well, it would cost about $6 million. And I thought, yeah, that's a lot to pay. But as I thought about it, well, wait a second. We've got precincts, we've got precinct chairs, we've got people who volunteer. That's also in the Constitution, the spirit of volunteerism in the Republican Party. Why don't we just do it ourselves? And I was having this conversation with Senator Lee, and I had in my mind that we could probably do this for $500,000. And before I got halfway through the sentence, he said we could do it for $300,000. And then I heard Carson George say something similar. Now I don't know what it would cost to do that, but it would certainly be worth looking at and saying, let's just do our own primary. Let's let the lieutenant governor know who our candidate is instead of waiting and having no access to voter rolls, no access to our cast vote records, basically no control of our primary election. It's been amazing to me. Every grammar request that I've done has been denied. I have not had a single grammar request admitted. I go to the courts, they're denied there. People say, oh, well, you're losing all of your court cases. Well, there's a reason for that. It means you're asking the right questions, you're fighting the right fights, and you're trying to get through a system that is clearly biased against the people. This is our election, it's a Republican election. I do want to say how much I appreciate my friend Rob and his family and everything that he's done. I think of running a convention the way you did it last year, and my hat is off to you, all of the volunteers, everybody that helped with that. Thank you so much for all that you do and have done and will do. So.
Well, thank you, Phil. And I'll start the same thing. I've said a number of times, Phil and I go way back. We've known each other well for 11 years or so and have worked on a lot of really important things for the state of Utah, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for good Utahns all across this state who do good things and that I've had the pleasure to work with. I think the important thing is I'm thinking through, why am I a Republican? Why am I willing to give so much time? Why did I run for chair, and why am I willing to run for re-election for chair? And it goes back to that very original question that I answered, and I talked about the importance of family. It's all about my family and your family. It's about our Utah family. What do we want Utah to look like in 10 years? What do we want it to look like in 20 years? I believe this organization, the Republican Party, stands to be a big critical part of answering that question. And I want to make sure that we are in a place where we are elevated to get the right answer. I don't want to be in a place 20 years from now saying, oh man, we should have done something different. Now, ultimately, it won't always go our way every single time, but like I'm sure all of you, I would prefer to be in a place where I know that I tried my hardest and that we did the hard work and that we worked together to try to build a party that was a force for good rather than being surprised what we found ourselves with. And so I would encourage you as delegates to ask yourself the question of what is the party and what's the role of the chair of the party. The party is 950,000 people, it's 29 counties, it's 4,000 state delegates, it's 180 SCC members, it's donors, it's candidates, it's elected officials, it's people who vote, it's people who don't vote. It's people who are Republican because their mom and dad told them that's what our family does, and it's people who are Republican because they realized their mom and dad were wrong on their politics. That's what the Republican Party is. Now, the role of the chair, what's the role of the chair? The role of the chair is to elevate all of those people. It's not about 950,000 people, except for when it is. It's not about 29 individual counties, except for when it is. It's not about 4,000 delegates or 180 SCC members, except for when it is. You look at the candidates that we had last year, tremendous candidates. There were wonderful people, but there were a lot of them. And I look at Phil, and like I said, I supported him all the way to the primary. And I wish that he had been elected at the primary. I wish that all of our convention winners had been elected for the purpose of the party. But we have to ask ourselves, what is the question? It can't be about one race. It has to be about all of the party and what happens moving forward. I am committed to continuing to work with all of you and doing all that I can to build that party and to make sure that Utah continues to be what Utah needs to be.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you two great men. We appreciate you putting your hat in the ring. This is not an easy job, and so thank you again for traveling down. For all of you state delegates, we're gonna have a training as well. Do we have a date, Willie? Or he's gonna tell you about that training to get you all set for convention.
Thank you.
Shall we time him?
Yeah, please do. Please do. Yes. I have a couple things to cover. First off, gentlemen, thank you for coming down and spending. And I want to make a statement here that these are two really good men. And some of you are going to vote for one, and some of you are going to vote for the other. But that should not divide us. Okay? We don't hate the other person or that voted for the other person. We don't do that. We're Republicans. We come together. So let's start to fix that within our party, okay? Secondly, we are going to have a webinar training for state delegates. We'll make that announcement. It'll come out in an email format, an invitation to all the state delegates to have a pre-convention training and what to expect. So that'll be coming out in the next few days as far as a date, and that will include a Zoom link that you can join in on that, and we'll have a training on that so you guys know what to expect. So, last thing real quick, and I know I'm over my 1 minute, but if you look at the agenda for the state convention, at the very bottom, there are some proposed platform amendments. And historically, those never get addressed because the convention takes so darn long. And we have people working right now that are going to make a motion to change the agenda to move those up because we are voting with paper ballots. And in the past, when we voted on paper ballots, there's time in between to get some of this stuff done that's been put off and put off and put off. And
Willie,
yes,
tell them, how long has it been since we've amended the platform?
10 or 12 years.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
how long.
And they never get addressed because they're so far down the agenda as they are today. And so we're going to have somebody get up and make a motion at the convention to amend the agenda and move those up so that we can cover those things. They're not binding, they're just proposed platform amendments. And so we're gonna have those discussed during the voting while they're counting these paper ballots, okay? So Rob, you're gonna get that done, right? Okay, so hang on just a second, I'll get your question. But there's Bob McAtee's got one on the right to life issue. Significant, we need to address that and make sure that we make that issue more powerful on our platform, right? Say right. Okay. The one that I'm sponsoring myself is the role of government in broadband so that our communications through the internet are not owned and controlled by the government. Okay, and that is on here. So I would encourage you to read through these things, know that we're going to try to move them forward in the agenda. Vote yes for that. That's a yes vote, okay? to get that, so we can discuss these things and finally get that done. Your question, sir.
Well, yeah, I was just curious, who sets the agenda?
The chair.
Oh,
The chair sets the agenda. That is the chair's responsibility to set the agenda for all of these types of meetings, okay? And so, but there's a lot to cover. If you look at the bylaw amendments, there's some significant things there and constitutional amendments, yes.
Can I answer something real quick to give you context? So right now, we are not allowed to do platform consideration during an organizing year. But I'm a big believer in doing business. I like doing the business, whether I like the outcome or not, or agree with it or not. I think the dialogue is important. And there's a constitutional amendment in our proposal that would allow for platforms to be considered in organizing convention years. And that was introduced appropriately. That's going to be considered. Now, anything that passes goes immediately into effect. So parliamentarily, I probably should have still left this off, but I decided, hey, if that goes immediately into effect, as long as these platforms were introduced according to our guideline requirements, we would put them conditionally on the agenda. So that's why they're at the bottom, because right now they are out of order and not germane. But should that constitutional change happen, suddenly they would be in order. So that's why they are listed as a conditional platform amendment. If you guys as delegates decide to pass the constitutional change, then those would be available to be considered conditionally. Now, that was my ruling, so to speak. You as delegates can say, nope, we think it's still out of order because technically when the agenda went out, you couldn't consider platform amendments. That will be another discussion you guys all get to decide there on the 17th. And you're gonna be there, Orem, Utah Valley University, May 17th.
So just in case you're wondering, that's a yes vote. Okay, just in case you were wondering on that. And so he's going to, that will be proposed, let's say yes to the constitutional amendment to allow us to vote on that, and then let's say yes to that specific thing, and go through and read it, spend the time, get to know those things. They're not lengthy, they're actually fairly simple and straightforward. But you were elected by but to do this job. Let's do our jobs. Let's represent well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys. So watch for that information on the training. We can help with questions. And let's give these guys one more round of applause. Thank you.
Don't worry, I'll come with the cooler.